Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome into the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. So head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching on X, _ Jonathan Smith to follow the show there. Maybe you're listening on that Indy Sports Ticket app. No matter how you're listening, it is greatly, greatly appreciated. And since it's appreciated, I like to give back sometimes. And right now, we've got an awesome deal going on, right? We have an awesome deal going on right now with Zaxby's. When ordinary chicken just won't cut it, Zaxby's delivers a flavor experience that speaks louder than words. That's why we've got a sweet deal going on for you this Friday. On sale now, you can get $50 in gift certificates for only $25 at IndySportsTicket.com. That's IndySportsTicket.com, and click on that sweet deals tab. Offer available only for Wesleyan Road, Indianapolis, Avon, and Canby locations. Today's show also sponsored by Holiday World and Splash and Safari. Make one more good memory with your kid before you send them back to school. School starting back soon. My wife, a teacher, she has orientation tonight. If you're a student and you have her, congratulations. My wife is really good at her job, but make one more memory with your kid before you send them back to school. Holiday World and Splash and Safari. We're going to be giving away tickets in that 11 o'clock hour, probably between 11:15 and 11:20, just like we've done the last 2 days. So that's when we're giving away the tickets here in about an hour and 20 minutes. ESPN, not my favorite sports outlet, but they write and put out some interesting things from time to time. And the other day, they ranked the 2025 NFL rosters from best to worst. Notable teams like the Ravens came in first, as they should. Loaded roster. Once again, can Lamar Jackson finally play well in the playoffs? We're going to find out. The Eagles were second. Lions third. Bills fourth. Chiefs fifth. Watch out now. Watch out. Broncos sixth. Let's go Broncos. Rams eighth. Niners 10th. And your Indianapolis Colts, we're nowhere close to that. You can find them ranked 25th behind teams like the Miami Dolphins, Las Vegas Raiders, Jacksonville Jaguars, and New England Patriots. Chris Ballard, the almighty, amazing general manager, has built the 25th best roster in the NFL, according to ESPN. And look, ESPN's wrong all the time. Maybe this roster will surprise us. Maybe JT Tuimoloau shows up as a rookie and is like immediately impactful as a second round pick. Maybe that happens. Maybe Tyler Warren shows up and he's like the fourth best tight end in the league immediately. Maybe Tanner Bortolini can play better from the start of the season to the end of the season compared to what we saw last year, where I feel like the more Tanner Bortolini played, the worse he got. Maybe Matt Gonsalves, who was drafted as an offensive tackle 2 years ago out of Pitt, maybe he can make it as a right guard. Maybe bringing in Cameron Bynum and Charvarius Ward into the secondary, maybe that was all that needed to happen for this defense that was bad last year to all of a sudden become really good. Maybe that's all that was needed. I am not buying it. This Colts roster is bad. Felt like that before I saw their roster stacked up to, every other roster in the NFL. There's a lack of depth, and quarterback is obviously a major issue. That's a large part of why the Colts are ranked 25th, because they're either going to run Daniel Jones out there, who's not very good, or they're going to run Anthony Richardson out there, who's also not very good. One way or the other, the Colts are going to have the lesser quarterback in just about every NFL game that they play this season. Really tough to win when you have the lesser quarterback on your sideline. And that's going to happen for the Colts time and time again, whether they run Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson out there. The other thing that I noticed when really kind of stepping back and looking at the entire Colts roster, there's no real strength. So if you go and you read this, ranking of the rosters, they highlight the biggest strength on every roster. And for the Colts, when I saw that section, I was like, what are they going to pick? They picked interior defensive line, anchored by DeForest Buckner, who's 31, and Grover Stewart, with Neville Gallimore and Adetomiwa Adebawore and Eric Johnson. The last three names I just listed, you've never heard. And that is the strength, not of the Colts defense, but of the entire roster. When ESPN says your defensive tackles are your strength and it's aging DeForest Buckner, 31 years old, who missed 6 games last year, and Grover Stewart, who I believe is 32. He's slightly older than DeForest Buckner. When they're saying that that's your strength, that's not good. That's not good at all, but it makes sense. You know, people want to tell me that the Colts receiving room is good. I don't think it's good. I think it's average. Michael Pittman Jr.'s a solid wide receiver. Alec Pierce is a solid deep threat. Josh Downs, solid underneath guy who can create some separation. Adonai Mitchell, all the athletic tools in the world, didn't produce in the slightest last year. So it can't be wide receiver. It can't be the offensive line, given the number of pressures that they gave up last year. And now they're starting center Ryan Kelly and they're starting right guard Will Fries. They're both now gone. They're both playing in Minnesota. Braden Smith can't stay healthy. Bernard Raymond been pretty solid as the left tackle the last 2 seasons. But outside of that, center, question mark. Right guard, question mark. Right tackle, Braden Smith, can he stay healthy? Probably not. He hasn't. Time and time again. And then it's like, Chris Ballard, trenches guy. If it's not the offensive line, it's got to be edge rusher. Yeah. Kwity Paye. 8 sacks is a good season for him. Good run defender. That's what you want people saying about your edge rushers. Leatu Latu, 15th overall pick last year, first defensive player drafted. He's the other starting edge rusher. 4 sacks last year, was only good enough to play 54% of the Colts' defensive snaps. Well, who's their third edge, right? There's got to be some depth. No, it's rookie JT Tuimoloau, who's never played an NFL snap. He's their third best edge rusher. Linebacker, they got Zaire Franklin, Pro Bowler last year. Yeah, also had the highest missed tackle percentage in the NFL amongst qualifying linebackers. Yeah. Oh, and the other linebacker is Jalen Carlies, or Carlies, however you pronounce it. Apologies if I said it wrong. Yeah, he barely played last year. This team's going to be bad. And the more I read and the more I look at other teams and the more I look at this schedule, the more and more realistic it becomes. Because the important things for the Colts are lacking. Quarterback. That is the weakness of the roster. If quarterback is the weakness on your roster, you're not going to win very many games. You're not going to. There's question marks all over the place when I look at this roster. And look, if these question marks turn into positive exclamation points, then maybe this Colts roster can put out a pretty good product. Adonai Mitchell is a question mark. Tyler Warren, I get that we're excited. I get that the Colts spent the 14th overall pick on him, and there's a lot of hype. He's played 0 NFL snaps. He is a question mark. Tanner Bortolini got worse as the year went on last year. He is a question mark. Matt Gonsalves played tackle last year. Very little guard. Now he's going to play right guard. He's a question mark. Braden Smith's health, it's question mark. Leatu Latu, question mark. JT Tuimoloau, he's a question mark. Jalen Carlies, question mark. How is Charvarius Ward going to fit on this defense? It's a question mark. It is. The rest of the guys that we even know about on defense, how do those guys fit in Lou Anarumo's new system? There's just a lot of questions that I don't feel great about the answers. But hey, on the bright side, the secondary is a little bit more talented. So at least we can hang our hat on that. And that is thanks to Chris Ballard deviating from the norm and actually using free agency. Chris Ballard he held his big press conference yesterday. 27 minutes of Chris Ballard. I watched all 27 minutes, and I think the most telling thing that I heard wasn't what Chris Ballard said. It was what my wife said while I was watching it. She said, quote, "He's so vague, he doesn't really say much of anything." And it's true. He doesn't. And, he's been here for 9 years, and so you know that. I know that. I just feel like I need to do my due diligence to sit down and watch the whole thing. He opens the press conference with this 5-minute monologue on all sorts of stuff. I'll be honest, I skipped it. Didn't want to hear Chris Ballard spew his own nonsense. I want to hear him respond to other people's nonsense. And he didn't say much. With that being said, I do have some clips from it that I found interesting. Someone asked him about Anthony Richardson missing OTAs and how that impacts the quarterback battle. I would have thought, hey, if you're not playing in OTAs and you get to see a little bit more Daniel Jones, that should impact Anthony Richardson standing in this quarterback battle. But that's not what Chris Ballard thinks.
I think everything, I think it starts now. Look, OTAs is that's important, but there's not any pads on. All right. So, now that we're getting the pads and the work, I've always viewed OTAs as a developmental aspect of our game, which we're losing a little bit, but that's a teaching and learning and developmental time. This is when we crank up. So everything will be evaluated from practices to any kind of scrimmages we do, preseason games, all of that will be evaluated.
You notice how Chris Ballard right there, when talking about OTAs and Anthony Richardson being out and the impact on the quarterback battle, he was going to say everything matters, but he had to stop himself because clearly everything doesn't matter. OTAs, it's just a developmental period. He's clearly not putting much weight into OTAs impacting the quarterback position. And I just find that really interesting because that Chris Ballard, the guy who took Anthony Richardson 4th overall, wants him to be the starter. And I'm just really curious to know if he'd feel this way if Anthony Richardson had played the whole OTAs and looked good. There is just a major lack of trust with everything that Chris Ballard says. Okay? He's a bad car salesman. I was thinking about this last night. A good car salesman will tell you stuff that you need to know or stuff that's valuable. Hey, this model, it's a 4-cylinder engine as opposed to a 6. Gets 32 miles to the gallon. This other model only gets 27. That car that other company makes, it only gets 29. So, the gas mileage is a little bit better. A good car salesman will tell you things that are true and kind of important with the idea of expecting for you to become more interested in the car. Chris Ballard tries to do that, but he only says things that are true. If Chris Ballard had to sell you a car, and he tried to do it the same way that he tries to sell this Colts roster every year, it would be this car has 4 wheels, and that's a good thing. You need a car with 4 wheels, and these 4 wheels are better than all the other 4 wheels. That's how he sells this Colts team. There's no detail, and we've heard it for 9 years. You've heard it. And so now whenever he talks, it's just I don't want to hear a thing that this guy says because he's just going to say things that are true or pandering. We have DeForest Buckner, and that's a good thing. He won't tell you why that's a good thing. He won't mention the fact that, he missed 6 games last year and is aging. He won't bring up that part. OTAs don't matter because they're developmental. It's really more of a developmental period. If that's the case, then you should be very alarmed that Anthony Richardson missed a lot of OTAs with the shoulder injury. Because if there's anyone on this roster that needs to be developed more, it's Anthony Richardson. And once again, I'm just really curious to know if he would feel this way if Anthony Richardson had played all of OTAs and had looked good. Would he have said that? Or would he have come out and been no, everything matters. OTA is very, very important. in the evaluation process. If you don't look good without pads on, how can we expect you to look good with pads on? I can just hear him saying something like that. And it's just really funny that we're in year 9 of this. And you just know that there's people out there buying it. And I won't do it. I find it funny really more than anything else. This guy trying to sell us on this Colts roster that's basically the same as last year. Every piece is the same except they added Javarius Ward, Cam Bynum, and Tyler Warren. Safeties, not like they're the new running back. They like teams look at safeties like, yeah, we can find a good safety anywhere. Not a big deal. Corner, obviously very, very important. And then tight end. To me, tight ends are luxuries. Okay. They're Gucci bags. Okay. Like you don't just go buy one because they're super important. No, like you go out and you buy, a Gucci bag or whatever you like after like the rest of your life is in order and like you're established and you have money. To me, tight ends are luxuries. They are not necessities. The Eagles didn't win last year, the Super Bowl because they had a great tight end. No, they won the Super Bowl because their offensive line was great and their defensive line was great. So they added a tight end, which is a luxury. They added a safety, which isn't super important. They added one position of incredible importance, and that's Javarius Ward at corner. The other two additions, I would have rathered them gone out and found like a really good left tackle, or I guess right tackle, one a little more reliable than Braden Smith. Or if they'd gone out and found like a really good edge rusher, that'd have been way more valuable than bringing in Cam Bynum. So I'm not buying this roster. I'm not buying what Chris Ballard's trying to sell once again. And I just can't stand it. But Chris Ballard did say other things, some things that upset me, some things that made some sense. And I've got all the audio for you. I'm gonna continue to play it when we come back here in about 4 minutes. By the way, Zach Hicks is joining the show at 11:20 to talk about the Ballard press conference and the start of Colts training camp. And here in about an hour, we're going to give away tickets to Holiday World and Splash and Safari, so make sure you're tuned in at that point. More Chris Ballard audio when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
If it's in today's sports world, it's here. The real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the real Jonathan Smith Show. Here in an hour, Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts is going to join the show. We're going to talk more about this Chris Ballard press conference. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, X, or the Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. Today's show brought to you by Holiday World and Splash and Safari. Here in a little less than an hour, we are going to give away tickets so you can make one more memory with your kid before you send them back off to school. Chris Ballard obviously took questions yesterday, a lot of them pertaining to Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones. Way more questions about Anthony Richardson than Daniel Jones, because obviously he's the young guy. And I think that people will want to see him win the starting job over Daniel Jones, because Daniel Jones simply isn't very good at football. So Anthony Richardson, hasn't developed. Part of that has been injury. That's been problematic. But, Chris Ballard was asked about the timeline of Anthony Richardson and the lack of development. And here's what Chris Ballard had to say.
Do you think people regret Baker Mayfield's timeline, Sam Darnold's timeline? Let's just go. Exactly. And so how about sometimes you got to have a little patience with a guy and let them grow through things. Now, there's got to be, like, if you just know this guy, no, he can't do it. But if you think, hey, he's on the right trajectory, why are you going to flush him just because people outside think you should flush him? I don't agree with that. I think we need to give Anthony every chance to be the best he can be. And I think he can be really good, but things got to come together.
Chris Ballard right there talking about Anthony Richardson. And I hate the comparison so much. Oh, well, do you think people regret Baker Mayfield's timeline? Baker Mayfield was stuck in Cleveland with Freddie freaking Kitchens as his head coach. Oh, and he still won 6 games in 13 starts that rookie season. He still completed 64% of his passes. He still threw 27 touchdown passes. Once again, with Freddie Kitchens as his head coach. He still found a way to be significantly more productive than, our guy here, Anthony Richardson, has ever been. Sam Darnold, right? Didn't get off to as good of a start in his career as Baker Mayfield. Only completed 58% of his passes his rookie season. Sound familiar? Played more than 4 games, but sounds familiar. Only 17 touchdowns and 15 interceptions. But hey, let's also remember, he was drafted by the New York Jets, arguably the most dysfunctional franchise. Actually, that's not true. That's the Browns. One of the most dysfunctional franchises in the recent history of the NFL. Year 2 wasn't bad, 7-6 and 13 starts, completed 62% of his passes, 19 touchdowns. Not terrible. Better than anything we've seen from Anthony Richardson so far. Both Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield were both significantly better than Anthony Richardson to start their careers. In addition to the Sam Darnold point, 7 years. That's how long it took him to have one successful season in the NFL. One. Took him 7 years. So are we just gonna hold on to Anthony Richardson and keep giving him opportunities 7 years into his career? Hey, is that really what we're gonna do? Are we just gonna sit around and be like, hey, maybe next year? And we're just gonna do the whole maybe next year thing until Anthony Richardson retires with an insane amount of career earnings and 20 wins and 80 games missed. Come on. It is not fair at all to compare Anthony Richardson to the likes of Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, given how significantly less productive he's been. And in addition to it, in a much better situation. The receivers that he's throwing to, better than what Baker Mayfield had in Cleveland and better, early in their careers. Obviously, Baker ended up having Odell Beckham Jr. and Jarvis Landry and some other guys. I'm talking about early when he first showed up. But like Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs, better than the options that Sam Darnold had in New York, better than the options that Baker Mayfield had in Cleveland at the start of their careers. I would like to throw out another name that I would so far compare the Anthony Richardson early career to. How about Josh Rosen? Josh Rosen was a first-round pick by the Arizona Cardinals, 10th overall, went 3-13 his first season. Excuse me, 3-10. The team as a whole went 3-13. He completed 55% of his passes, threw for 2,200 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 14 interceptions. The following year, the Arizona Cardinals drafted Kyler Murray, number 1 overall, because it only took him 13 games to see that Josh Rosen just didn't have it. Didn't have the processing ability, didn't have the accuracy, didn't have the proper decision making. And next thing you know, he's out of the league. Like, if you can go find Josh Rosen on LinkedIn, and he's like a marketing manager somewhere. You know pretty quickly, most of the time with these guys, whether or not they can last. And I get, like, it's fun to bring up the Geno Smiths and the Sam Darnolds, you know, resurrecting their careers all these years later. But it's like saying that you can find great 6th-round picks because Tom Brady was drafted in the 6th round. Like, sure, technically that's true, but the list of guys that have been great in the 6th round, that have been great and drafted in the 6th round, is pretty short. Just like the number of, you know, quarterbacks who get off to a rough start their first 2 or 3 years in the league and then become great in year 7, 8, 9, and 10. That list pretty short as well. And every single guy had to leave the franchise that drafted them. Like, Baker Mayfield not working in Cleveland isn't like a testament to how bad Baker Mayfield was early in his career. It was more so a testament to how dysfunctional and bad the Browns are. Sam Darnold not working in New York, it's less about Sam Darnold struggling early in his career and more so about how dysfunctional the New York Jets are and how bad of a coach guys like Adam Gase are and Freddie Kitchens. So really, if Anthony Richardson has it, and he has the capability of being some, you know, really, really good. That's what Chris Ballard called him. If Anthony Richardson has the ability to be really good and it's not happening in Indianapolis, it's more so on the Colts than it is Anthony Richardson. They're the ones not developing him. They're the ones not teaching him how to slide, not jamming it into his brain. Because if he slid, you know, we probably would have seen a little bit more from him than what we have so far. It's just, I hate that comparison so much because it's not fair. It's like doing the whole, you can find great 6th-round picks because Tom Brady was good. Like, geez, man. Geez. That's not the only thing that Chris Ballard was asked about. He was also asked about this playoff drought. You know, haven't made the playoffs in 4 years. And here's what Chris Ballard had to say about not making the playoffs once again last year.
Yeah, it sucks, man. I mean, first time in my career I've ever gone 4 years without making. I mean, no, it's a bothersome thing, especially with the expectations we have here in Indy. I mean, that's the one thing with Jim that I always appreciated, man. Like he don't want to be average. He wants to be great, and that's Carly and I. I mean, look, we spent a lot of time together because she's around us so much. But I mean, she always said, "Look, I don't want to be good. I want to be great." And, you know, that's always the goal going in. And, you know, 22 was 22 to lead, you know, the 23 season, we, you know, last game of the year, we're right there. And even last year at the end, you know, we didn't play as good as I thought we should have, but we were still kind of in the mix. And then you go back to 21 and we're in the driver's seat and we piss it down our legs. We have got to finish better. Like that, at the end of the day, we have to finish the seasons better because we've had some really good football teams that just haven't got it done.
Chris Ballard right there talking about why his teams haven't made the playoffs, these last 4 years, and a minute to say that we didn't finish the season well enough multiple times, and he starts by saying no one wants to be average, which is just, I'm sitting there and my wife she's doing her nails or whatever while I'm watching this. She's like, well, yeah, like you're in professional sports. Believe it or not, no one wants to be average. Okay. The only professional sports franchise that has no desire to be good is the Pittsburgh Pirates. They're the only one. Every other professional sports franchise, except for maybe the Bulls, like they want to be good in some way, shape, or form. They want to be relevant. They want people to come to the games and make the playoffs and do all those things. So, Chris Ballard, I am so glad that you were like every other general manager in the NFL and you don't want to be average. Also, all those teams that missed the playoffs were not good football teams. They expanded the NFL playoffs to where now almost half of the league gets in. Slightly above average NFL football teams make the playoffs now. And you couldn't do it. If the Colts had a good football team once in the last 4 years, they would have made the playoffs. Okay? It's not like only 8 teams get in. No, 14. 14 of 32 teams, almost half the league makes the playoffs. If you don't make the playoffs, it's because you have a bad football team on your hands. It's really that simple. It talks about how, 2021, we pissed down our leg, and, that's the Carson Wentz year in Jacksonville where they lose on the road and all that kind of stuff. Teams that fall apart down the stretch usually do so for one or two reasons. One, they don't have good quarterback play, and they don't have good depth. As the season goes on, players get hurt. It happens to everyone except for the Philadelphia Eagles last year. And the deepest teams with the best quarterbacks can overcome it. Because if you have, multiple pass rushers like the Eagles did last year, it's not a big deal when you're starting outside linebacker Graham, who'd been in the league for forever. It doesn't matter when he gets hurt because you have other guys to fill those roles. Guys like Josh Sweat, who probably should have won Super Bowl MVP even though he didn't because of the way that he got after the quarterback. Depth is important, and the Colts don't have enough of it. They don't have enough depth. And the other way to overcome guys getting hurt, because I think everyone likes their football team when they're fully healthy. But when those 5 injuries happen, how do you feel about your team then? Those are the teams that make the playoffs and win playoff games. And one way to overcome those 5 injuries at a minimum that you know that you're going to have is depth. The other way to overcome it is to have Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or Matthew Stafford or whatever other quarterback you want to classify as good. And when you look at this Colts roster for this season, and even going back, they haven't had good enough quarterback play to overcome the injuries that every team in the NFL has. And they haven't had the depth to overcome it either, like teams like the Lions and the Eagles and even the Chiefs have, and the Bills. It's really amazing. The best teams in the NFL have 2 things: depth. When they go from their starter to their second string player, there's not a big drop off. Whereas with the Colts this year, there's going to be at every position except for quarterback. And they have a really good quarterback. It's really that simple. The Colts haven't had enough depth or good quarterback play the last 4 years to make the playoffs, and that falls directly on the shoulders of Chris Ballard. Speaking of depth and injuries, Chris Ballard was asked about injuries yesterday, and he gave a pretty short comment on it. I'm going to play that for you when we come back here in about 4 minutes. And I want to highlight the area of the Indianapolis Colts this year that can least afford to have injuries. I'll tell you what it is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
Dan Dockage at noon. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. Now, this is Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Coming up here in about 40 minutes, not only is Zach Hicks going to join the show to talk a little bit of Colts and everything Chris Ballard has said, we're also going to be giving away to Holiday World and Splash and Safari, giving you the opportunity to make one more memory with your kids before you send them back to school. So make sure you're tuned in here in about 40-ish minutes or so for your chance to win those tickets. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in to The Real Jonathan Smith Show, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, X__ Jonathan Smith, or the Indy Sports Ticket app. It is always greatly appreciated. Colts, Chris Ballard just keeps talking, and I keep listening, even though I don't want to. And Chris Ballard, he was asked about injuries. And this is what he had to say. You know, he talked about pretty much how injuries happen to everybody, and they're just a part of the NFL.
God's plan. I mean, I wish I could control injuries. If we could, I would get out of this and go start a business doing that, because you'd make a lot of money doing it. No, I mean, look, sometimes things happen. Guys get hurt. You wish it wouldn't happen, but it does, and you move forward no matter what.
And look, he's right. Chris Ballard, one of the very few times I will say that Chris Ballard is correct. Injuries happen to everybody. You can't really control them. They just kind of happen. Some guys never get hurt. Some guys get hurt all the time. And I talked about the Colts roster earlier in the show. And when trying to decide which position group for the Colts absolutely cannot sustain any injuries, it's a really tough choice. I feel that way about the offensive line, and I feel that way about the defensive line. Like, the depth behind these dudes, it's not great. Like, if Javarius Ward goes down, or if Jalen Jones goes down, or if Kenny Moore goes down, Juju Brents, another guy who can't really seem to stay healthy, was a second-round pick. There's some talent there. You look at, but like that, man, that defensive line, like if Kwity Paye gets hurt, and the fact that I'm talking about the importance of Kwity Paye right now, and it's July, should just let you know how bad this Colts team is going to be. And the fact that the over-under is set at 7.5, you should 1,000% bet the under, because Kwity Paye, he can't afford to get hurt this year. Leatu Latu can't afford to get hurt, because then you're calling on dudes like JT Tuimoloau, rookie, who maybe he's really good. I don't know. He's a rookie. I think playing edge in the NFL is tough, right? It's like if either one of those guys get hurt, it's like, hey, rookie, let's get you in there. And then if both of them get hurt, then you're calling on like Isaiah Land or Desmond Little, who may not even be on the roster when they have to, after they make their cuts. Okay, because you know that Samson Mabukam and Tyquan Lewis, like those guys are going to get hurt. Like, just chalk it up. It's going to happen. The lack of depth on this team is incredibly concerning. It is. Like, the lack of depth on this team is going to be what hurts it. Unless they have some incredible run where nobody gets hurt, the lack of depth is incredibly concerning for this Indianapolis Colts team going forward. Chris Ballard was also asked about Lou Anarumo and the new defense and how guys are going to kind of fit in. Here's Chris Ballard talking about the new defense and what needs to happen for the defense to get better from last year.
Well, I mean, look, all of us, and Buck's right, and look, Gus Bradley and that staff, those are good football coaches. Let me preface that. Those guys are really good football coaches, and all of us have our name on it. Like me, coaches, players, everybody has their name on it. I think, Lou's a little different. You're going to see some schematic change, probably a little more diversity within the scheme. But look, at the end of the day, this game is not hard. Like, blocking and tackling, and don't turn it over. usually you can track those things to wins. All right. We've got to be a better tackling team. Hopefully I've helped them. And my staff and I have helped them by giving them, more players to create a little more competition. But we've got to be a better tackling defense without question. And, hopefully we've added the pieces to help that.
Chris Ballard right there talking about the defensive struggles last year and what has to change. And he's right. For once. Sure, the defensive scheme is going to be a little bit different. Nice hearing that we're going to hear some diversity. We're going to go into the bye week, and there's actually going to be a chance that Lou Anarumo gets in the lab and cooks something up for whoever they play the following week. And ultimately, though, it doesn't really matter the scheme or the coach if your guys can't tackle. The Colts were a terrible tackling team last year. They were. And, that obviously falls on the shoulder of, Zaire Franklin and, obviously all of the defensive players. But it also falls on the offense. The defense was on the field an incredible amount last year. The Colts offense did a terrible job of holding on to the football and allowing that defense to rest. And I wonder if part of why the Colts missed so many tackles last year was because of the fatigue from having to be on the field 35, 40 minutes a game. Like, that's not easy when you're having to play that many snaps and you're having to tackle other grown, very athletic men. So I would really like to see the Colts commit a little bit more to running the football this year, whether that's with the quarterback, Daniel Jones, or Anthony Richardson, or if that's with Jonathan Taylor, who once again is going to be the best player on this Colts offense. Okay, there's a little more depth at running back this year with Khalil Herbert. There wasn't any last year, and I'm willing to bet that's part of why they didn't run the football as much. But since there's a little bit more depth there now, maybe they're a little more willing to run the football 35 times a game. If not, just so simply, they can keep the defense off the field. Because that defense played an incredible number of snaps last year. And as the game went on, and as they wore down, they missed more and more tackles, which is not some new phenomenon. So we'll kind of see how things go for them kind of going forward. The NFL season, like training camp, it is officially underway. All 32 teams have told players to report. Not everyone has actually reported. Trey Hendrickson's in Florida. Bengals, what a mess. What an absolute mess. And as the NFL season approaches, there's a stat. It comes out every year, where someone's like, like half the teams or whatever the number is, 40% of the teams that made the playoffs last year won't make it this year, and parity and all that kind of stuff. And I was thinking about that last night. And who are the NFL leap and slide candidates in terms of teams, not players? Who are the teams that can, level up or slowly get worse? And so I made a list. Here's my list. I think the Rams are a team who can make a leap from good playoff team to Super Bowl contender. They got better. Devontae Adams is a better player than Cooper Kupp. Puka Nacua is a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. Defensively, they've got 2 guys who can really get after the passer. Jared Verse, who won Defensive Rookie of the Year last year, and Byron Young, who should have won it 2 years ago. I like their defensive tackles. Kobe Turner, that dude's a good player. Braden Fisk, who plays both inside and out. He had 8.5 sacks as a rookie. Plus, how do you not like the Sean McVay, Matthew Stafford combo? They are the total opposite of where the Colts are at. Okay, there's depth on defense. Sean McVay, head coach. Matthew Stafford, they're both total savants at what they do. If Sean McVay was the Colts, was the coach of the Indianapolis Colts, I would probably bet them to make the playoffs. Like that is how great of a head coach he is. Meanwhile, you got Shane Steichen and Anthony Richardson / Daniel Jones, who have a ton left to prove. After for Richardson and Steichen only 2 years, and for Daniel Jones 6 years. Just the total opposite. I think that the Rams are going to be a really, really good team this year that has a chance to legitimately win the Super Bowl. Obviously, they have to stay healthy in order for that to happen, but I do really like what the Rams have going on. The Dolphins, I think, are a very good candidate to fall or slide from a middle-of-the-pack team to an only 5 or 6 win team. The Dolphins are going to score points. Their front seven's good. The issue, Tua can't stay healthy. The offensive line is bad. And the secondary is going to struggle because they don't have good players. And their biggest issue is I don't think that the locker room buys into Mike McDaniel. It's interesting. I was thinking about this last night as well. It seems like the coaches that the media likes and the coaches that players like / respect very rarely overlap. Bill Belichick never answered any question seriously. Media didn't like him because of it. And players really respected him because he was tough and he had a standard. Tom Coughlin was a tough disciplinarian who won 2 Super Bowls. Michael Strahan didn't like him at first because he was tough and old school, but he grew to like him over time and he respected him. Eli Manning once said he was a great coach to play for. Said that in 2016. Media didn't like him, though, because he didn't answer their questions, and he was tough, and he was rigid. Bill Parcells wasn't liked either. Mike Freeman of the New York Times wrote that Bill Parcells can be, quote, bullying, manipulative, nasty, and extremely complex. But players respected him. Many players, like Curtis Martin, credit Parcells with developing them into better players and professionals. Some other players, like Keyshawn Johnson, even acknowledged that Parcells made them better players and helped them to succeed. Curtis Martin also described Bill Parcells as a father figure and mentioned that they still stay in touch. The guy that the media didn't like, but players did. The list goes on. And then you got dudes like Mike McDaniel, who looks like he could write a sports column in Miami. Media loves him. He's quirky, he's funny, he's loose. He's just fun, fastest show on turf. Now he's probably going to be fired at some point during the season, maybe at the end. He was too loose. The players don't respect him. They walk all over him. They're late to meetings. Jalen Ramsey was a problem in Miami because he didn't respect Mike McDaniel. You notice that he wasn't really much of an issue when he was playing for the Rams and Sean McVay. That's not a coincidence. It's very rare territory as a coach to be liked by both the media and respected by your players. And it's a really interesting thing. Mike McDaniel, they're talking about how they're going to be built more on toughness and all these things. And Dan has said something that I'm hopefully never going to forget. You can always lighten up, but it's really hard to toughen up. And a lot of their roster is back. And it's a lot of the same guys from last year. And, once you set a standard, it's really hard to move the standard up, which is part of why I like what Carly Ursay had to say about how the standard here is now best. I think that's a really good thing going forward, setting the standard high. Mike McDaniel didn't do that in Miami. Good luck changing it this year. I fully expect them to slide and be a legitimately bad team this year. When we come back, top of the hour, 11 o'clock, I'm going to continue running through my NFL leap and slide candidates coming up here in about 25 minutes. We're going to have Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts on the show to talk about Chris Ballard's comments yesterday and the Colts training camp starting. And here in about 20 minutes, we're going to give away tickets to Holiday World and Splash and Safari. So make sure you're tuned in for that. All that coming your way here in about 4.5 minutes.
do this. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome into the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching on X, __ Jonathan Smith to follow the show there. Follow me there and watch the show there. You can also listen on that Indy Sports Ticket app, but you can also listen to the Dan Dockett Show from noon to 3. Ross Campbell, you're right. Cubs finally get to 60 wins, trying to keep pace with the Brewers, who are smoking hot right now. And, geez, the Brewers just kind of come out of nowhere. By the way, today's show is sponsored by Holiday World and Splash and Safari. We're giving away tickets here in about 15-ish minutes. And, if you win the tickets, you're going to have an opportunity to create one more awesome memory with your kids. And you should go to Zaxby's after you go to Holiday World, because when ordinary chicken just won't cut it, Zaxby's delivers a flavor experience that speaks louder than words. That's why we got a sweet deal going on for you right now. This Friday, on sale now, you can get $50 in gift certificates for only $25 at IndySportsTicket.com. That's IndySportsTicket.com, and click on the Sweet Deals tab. Offer available only for Wesleyan Road, Indianapolis, Avon, and Canby locations. Once again, those Holiday World tickets coming out here in like 15 minutes. So I'm doing this NFL leaps and slide teams thing right now. And, so far I've said that the Rams, I think they're going to take a leap from good playoff team to Super Bowl contender. I think the Dolphins fall from like a middle of the pack 9-8 team to a legitimately bad football team, talking like 5-12, 6-11, 4-13, somewhere in there. I think the Patriots leap from bad to fighting for a playoff spot. Players respect Mike Vrabel. The dude won games with Ryan Tannehill. Okay, he's a big, tough dude who's going to go in and, give real standards and expectations for that organization. He's one of the better coaches in the NFL. They have Drake May, who had a solid rookie season given the major lack of talent on that roster. So they've got the head coach. I think they've got the quarterback. And they just drafted Will Campbell, 3rd overall. And if he hits as a legitimate left tackle, then they'll have 3 of the biggest issues solved on their team that every team is trying to solve. Can we find a good quarterback? Can we find a good left tackle to protect that quarterback? And can we find a good head coach to help elevate the rest of the roster and, of course, the quarterback? And to me, that's enough to compete for a playoff spot. So if Will Campbell hits, and I think he will, then the Patriots, I don't think that they necessarily make the playoffs because the AFC is really good, but they're in the hunt. They're going 9-8, 10-7, and they're either sneaking into that final wild card spot, or they're, the 8th seed, like one spot out. So I really like what the Patriots are building. Broncos, they take another leap. I told you that they'd be good last year. They're going to be better this year. Okay? They're taking a leap from good playoff team to legitimate Super Bowl contender. I said earlier in the week that I think they're actually going to win the AFC West. Sean Payton is a widely respected head coach. Okay? One of the best offensive minds in the NFL. I like Bo Nix. I think he had a really good rookie season. How much of that was him? How much of that was Sean Payton? I don't really know. But I know that he was productive in that offense. And this is the first time since 2014 that the Broncos will have the same coach and quarterback in back-to-back seasons. Okay? Now, that's not the only reason that I like them, because there are other teams, obviously, in the AFC with better quarterbacks than Bo Nix. Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, obviously. I like this roster as a whole. They might have the best offensive line in the NFL. The Broncos have the offensive line that Chris Ballard dreams of. The Broncos led the NFL last year in both pass block and run block win rate. In 2024, they led the league in those two categories. and they returned all 5 starters this year. So the offensive line might just be the best in the NFL. If it's not the best, then it'll be amongst the best in the NFL. The defense was stellar last year. They got after the quarterback. Patrick Surtain wins defensive player of the year. He's the best cornerback in the NFL. They bring in Dre Greenlaw. Nick Bonito was dominant off the edge last year. They led the NFL in sacks last year. Like they get after the quarterback. They bring in a really good linebacker who can cover and stuff the run, and they've got a great corner. That roster is really, really good. Everyone understands how great of a coach Sean Payton is. And Bo Nix, if he can just get a little bit better, then I really like where the Broncos are headed. Athletic, good arm, all those very, very important things. So I like the Broncos to kind of take a bit of a leap from a fringe playoff team to a legitimate Super Bowl contender. The Detroit Lions, I think they slide a little bit. They slide from a Super Bowl contender like they were last year to just a good playoff team. You could argue that the Lions had the best roster in the NFL. ESPN ranked their roster 3rd. But it's not just about the roster. That did take some hits, by the way. Frank Ragnar retires, one of the best centers in the NFL. They also lost Kevin Zeitler, who played offensive guard. The offensive line was their strength last year. Now they're replacing 2 pieces. That's important. That's not why I think they'll slide, though. The reason I think we see the Lions take a step back is because both coordinators left. Both coordinators left. Aaron Glenn was the defensive coordinator. Now he's the head coach of the New York Jets. Ben Johnson was the offensive coordinator. Now he's the head coach of the Bears. Usually, bad coordinators don't get head coaching jobs. It's usually the really good ones. And the guys that they have decided to replace Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson with, I don't have much confidence in. John Morton is the new offensive coordinator. He hasn't been an offensive coordinator since 2017 with the New York Jets, where he lasted 1 season. That's the only season he's ever called plays. The last 2 years, he's been the Broncos passing coordinator. So he's very unproven. That's concerning. Their new defensive coordinator is Kelvin Shepard. He's never been a defensive coordinator before. He's never had to call defensive plays. That matters. And I like Dan Campbell. I think Dan Campbell is an excellent, excellent head coach. Okay, like his ability to set a real standard for his players. His players obviously respect him. He obviously does a good job of getting his players fired up. And, he does a good job of keeping morale high in the locker room. Like that is his superpower as a head coach. And that's fine. Like every head coach is different. Every head coach is going to have strengths and weaknesses. And one of the things with Dan Campbell that I wouldn't necessarily call a weakness, because there are plenty of head coaches who don't do this. He doesn't call offensive plays. He doesn't call defensive plays. And that's a really important aspect of the actual game itself. And they've got two coordinators coming in who don't have much experience doing that. And so I expect them to take a slight step back because of that. Even though I like this roster, this is still a playoff team. They could still win that division. But they're not winning 15 games again, and I'm not picking them to play in or win the Super Bowl. They are no longer a Super Bowl contender because both of their coordinators left. I think we see the Bears go from a below-average team to a fringe playoff team. This is all about the coach and the offensive line improvements. Matt Eberflus wasn't going to succeed there because Matt Eberflus isn't going to succeed anywhere as an NFL head coach. Ben Johnson might. That is immediately an upgrade because he's a brilliant offensive mind with a good quarterback and now a good offensive line. The issue last year for the Bears was Caleb Williams got sacked more than any other quarterback in the NFL. And they went out and they acquired 2 things to help with that. They brought in a really smart offensive guy who's hopefully going to help him get the ball out a little bit quicker. And they upgraded both guard spots, left guard and right guard, and the center spot. And a lot of people are talking about Joe Thuney because He played for the Chiefs and, was offensive guard. He's been one of the better offensive guards. And they moved him out to tackle last year at Joe Tooney. Really good player, going to help the Bears immediately. But to me, the bigger addition is upgrading the center. Drew Dahlman is an experienced guy. And that is so important for a young quarterback. Because what does the center do? Obviously, they snap the football. If they're athletic, they'll pull block and do all those things. They also help set protections. They also help the quarterback identify, hey, this guy's blitzing, this guy's dropping, this guy's doing this. We need to slide the offensive line this way to pick up this blitz and whatever. And I think one of the hardest thing for new quarterbacks in the NFL, it's not throwing the football, right? Because you don't get drafted number 1 overall like Caleb Williams did if you can't throw the football efficiently, accurately, on time, all those things. The hard stuff is figuring out who's blitzing and coverage disguises and all those things. And having a experienced center like Drew Dahlman, having him be able to come in and hopefully take some of that off of Caleb Williams' plate, that would be, that's really going to help Caleb Williams. It just gives him less things to worry about. I like the linebackers for the Bears. I like the secondary. The front four is not great. I mean, they're going to have Dio Dangbo starting. Tells you all you need to know about that front four. Okay? So the next team that I have sliding is the Seattle Seahawks. I think they go from 10-7 to being a below 500 team. Sam Darnold isn't going to be better than Geno Smith was last year for the Seattle Seahawks. Everyone loved Sam Darnold last year. He had a top 5 season in terms of the statistics. The Vikings, though, were a perfect place for him. They have 2 good receivers. Justin Jefferson's the best receiver in the NFL. Jordan Addison, really good number 2 wide receiver. A really good tight end in TJ Hawkinson. They got a great offensive line. And an excellent offensive-minded head coach who does a good job calling plays and setting things up. The Seahawks don't have any of that. Seahawks have a defensive-minded head coach. Jackson Smith-Njigba is a good wide receiver. It's going to be his first year being the primary option now that DK Metcalf's gone. Cooper Kupp is an aging number 2 receiver. There's no great tight end. They have a defensive-minded head coach. They have a new offensive coordinator. Also, the offensive line hasn't been good the last 2 years. It's not a great situation for Sam Darnold. He's going to regress, and so will the Seattle Seahawks. Even though I do really like that defense, I just don't think that the quarterback play is going to be good enough to get back to 10 wins. The Chargers fall out of the playoffs. There's a lot to like about the Chargers. I like Jim Harbaugh. They added a couple good running backs. Najee Harris, they drafted one as well. They have a great, pairing of offensive tackles. Joe Alt, big. The offensive tackles for them are really good. And obviously, they have Justin Herbert, right? 3 things that every team is trying to solve. They have Jim Harbaugh, good head coach. Justin Herbert seems like he's the guy at quarterback, and they have not 1 but 2 really good offensive tackles. Also, Justin Herbert is, if you go to social media, he's the best quarterback to never win a playoff game. The issue for me is on defense. They're weak at defensive tackle. I think teams are really going to be able to run the football against that front. You could argue that Khalil Mack might be their best defensive lineman this year. He had 6 sacks last year, and he's 34 years old. That seems like a problem. I don't think they're great along that defensive line. Their secondary was good last year. There's not a ton of talent, though. And I'm kind of worried, did the clock strike midnight? And is that Chargers secondary with, 2 day 3 picks at corner and a 29-year-old? Did the clock strike midnight? And is that secondary going to turn back into a pumpkin? It doesn't inspire confidence at all for me. A defense that's not going to have very much pass rush and has a, not super talented secondary. To be fair, though, the secondary last year was really good. They were 6th in EPA per drop back. So We'll see if they can do it again. I'm just not quite convinced. I felt like a good pass rush from the Chargers would have been really important for them this season to kind of help mask a little bit more of the lack of talent on the back end of their defense. So we'll see. Very excited for the NFL season. Training camp is underway. Zach Hicks is joining me coming up here in about 5 minutes to talk about training camp. But before we do that, pull out your phone, 317-228-1430. Call in right now for your chance to win tickets to Holiday World and Splash and Safari, the sponsor for today's show. Do yourself a favor. Go make one more memory with your kid before you send them back to school, which is starting up pretty soon here. My wife, she's got orientation tonight. So once again, that number is 317-228-1430 for your chance to win tickets to Holiday World and Splash and Safari. We'll be right back here in about 4 minutes with the one and only Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit porky, and you may even have type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance may only cost you about $200 a month. Call Term Provider. Speak with Big Lou at 800-345-2789. Big Lou will find a term life policy for you even if you have type 2 diabetes, are overweight, or have high blood pressure. Term Provider has helped thousands of people like you who think they can't afford term life insurance. To buy $1 million of affordable term life for you, all you need to do is call Big Lou at 800-345-2789. Lou will make sure the scales are tipped in your favor. Call 800-345-2789. Big Lou will answer your call and work to fit you into a term life policy that you can afford. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He's on meds too. Call 800-345-2789 or biglou.com.
It may, one day, be a must-listen for sports enthusiasts.
Yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my butt.
Uh-oh. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Tickets, maybe you're watching on X, _ Jonathan Smith, maybe you're listening on that Indy Sports Ticket app. No matter how you're listening, it's greatly appreciated. Congrats to Ross for winning our Holiday World and Splashing Safari tickets. Joined now by the one and only Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts. Colts training camp starting today. Zach, what's going on, man? How are you?
Doing pretty good, man. Glad to be back covering, actual football now with the Colts. The dead part of the off season is just, it gets so killer by the end of like June, early July. But good to be back actually covering like new football rather than just continually looking back at last year and hoping things were different and stuff like that. Like we actually have new football coming up, which is just the best part of the off season, obviously.
Looking back at last year, is that really worse than looking forward to what's probably going to come this year?
It might be the same thing. Honestly, it might be a little worse, a little better. Who knows with this team? But at least we just get more like just something new. You can always sell yourself on the new thing. You can't sell yourself on changing the past, but about something new coming up, you can always sell yourself a little bit on that, even if you're as pessimistic as we probably all are. What's
the new thing that you're selling yourself on?
Well, I don't know about me personally, but I just think, I think the new defense, new players coming in on defense is something that's going to be pretty fun. Also, I mean, look, the weapons on offense, I think are going to be very fun as long as they're all healthy this year with Warren coming in, Downs and Pittman healthy again. So I think there are certain things to sell yourself on as long as you just ignore the most important position on the roster. I think there's some certain things that you can sell yourself on with this team.
You're right. You're right. Like Charvarius Ward, very exciting. Cam Bynum, very exciting out there on the back end. Everyone's really excited about Tyler Warren as well. And I don't know if you saw this or not, but did you see that ESPN ranked the Colts roster as the 25th best in the NFL?
Yeah, I think ESPN. So I did see a lot of those rankings on there, and I think the quarterback, I mean, obviously when you're ranking like quality of roster, like you are kind of misleading a little bit with that title because it felt like a lot of it was just how good the quarterback is and then like some other kind of aspects were in there. Cause like, there were like Washington, for instance, was like 7th or something. And it's like, yeah, they're going to be a playoff team this year. But like a lot of that was Jaden Daniels just being magic last year. Like their defense wasn't that special. The guys around them on offense, like really, what are you looking at here that makes them think that special? It's just Jaden Daniels is just a different level quarterback. So the 7th best roster, I mean, I guess if you're counting the quarterback, yeah. So I mean, I guess if you're counting the quarterback more than anything else on the Colts roster, sure, I could say 25th. I just feel like the title was a bit misleading by saying like best roster. It should have just been like a power ranking of teams at that point when I was reading that article. That's kind of what it came off as to me.
Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, talking about this Colts roster and training camp starting today. When I was looking at it, because I've got it pulled up, I think that like the starting 4-down linemen on this defense, like I feel pretty good about. Kwity Paye's a solid edge. Obviously, DeForest Buckner's a good player. Grover Stewart had a pretty good year last year. I think we're all hopeful that we get a little bit more from Leatu Latu. Besides quarterback, I think the thing that I'm most concerned about with the Colts roster is the depth on the defensive line. What to you is the second most concerning thing about the Colts roster?
No, I'm in complete agreement with you, man. I was saying this on the podcast the other day that I'm terrified of this defensive line. Like, I think it has the potential to be pretty good. Like, it has the potential to be a top 15 unit, top 10 unit, even if Leatu Latu hits, his draft projection by year 2 here. But there are a lot of things that need to go right for them to be good. And there are a lot of things that could go wrong that feel a lot more feasible because say Laiatu Latu is just kind of what he was last year, which is a fine pass rusher, but not that next level guy, then your starting group is not perfect, right? It's still like a lackluster starting group because you just don't have that guy off the edge. We don't think Kwity Paye is going to be that level guy. And then you're factoring that your two defensive tackles are pushing 30s. And that's when you start seeing some injuries come in here. And then you look at the depth behind them on the interior with Neville Gallimore, Tim Smith, Eric Johnson, Adetomiwa Adebawore. Like, those guys maybe can give you a little bit as pass rushers, but the run defense is going to be just atrocious if those guys touch the field. And then you look at the rotation at edge too. Like, if an injury were to happen to Kwity Paye or Laiatu Latu, you're counting on Samson Ebukam coming off an Achilles injury at 30 years old, where traditionally edge rushers don't come back well from that. You're looking at a rookie in JT Tuimoloau, who, again, rookie production can be a bit spotty, especially for a second-round pick. I wouldn't guess that he's going to be some giant contributor this year because it takes a minute for edge rushers to get there. And then Tyquan Lewis, who took a big step back last year, still a decent run defender, but the pass rush juice really took a step back last year. So I think the starting group, like you said, is fine on paper. And it's even better if Laiatu Latu can emerge and be that legit number one pass rusher off the edge. But it's a very thin group, in my opinion. I don't love the depth behind that top four. And even in that top four, I have some questions with the age of the interior guys, with Kwity Paye being able to take a next step, and with Laiatu Latu being able to take a next step. So, yeah, I think the defensive line is probably my second biggest concern behind quarterback on this team, because I do see a lot of avenues where this is maybe a bottom 10 pass rushing unit in the league. Again, I could see them being like a top 10 to top 15 if things go right, but I think the way that it bottoms out is much more feasible in my brain than the way that it tops out, and it looks really good for this unit.
I agree. Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, talking about this Colts roster as training camp gets underway. I think the biggest thing that I want to see from Laiatu Latu this year, I just want to see him be more of a three-down guy. Like, he only played 54% of the Colts snaps on defense last year. I'd like to see them play him at like 75% of the snaps. And you go back and you watch film a lot more than I do, so I'll ask you, did you feel like Laiatu Latu was good enough to be like a three-down guy last year? Because I felt like he really only got to play on like 3rd and 8 or more when they just needed someone to rush the passer.
Yeah, I think the run defense was better than advertised last year. Like, I'm not going to say that he's as good a run defender as Tyquan Lewis or as Kwity Paye and even as JT Tuimoloau, because I think JT Tuimoloau is going to be a really good run defender from day one. But I do think it's good enough to where you can feel comfortable playing him, upwards of 65, 70, 75% snaps this year. I don't think it was much of a big issue, especially with this new kind of system. They're coming in, they're going to ask him more to just control edges rather than controlling gaps. I think he'll be perfectly fine in run defense for the Colts. And I'm with you. I do want to see the snap usage just kind of have a steady uptick this year, especially, again, when you factor in that he was a top 15 pick. You have to play him like a top 15 pick. The training gloves, the training wheels, training gloves, whatever you want to say it, have to come off this year. And he has to be a full-time, like, legit producer for you. I think my bigger concern with him, though, is just I need to see more power in his game. That is really my only concern, because I don't think he has the bend to be like this pure finesse rusher that he wants to be in his brain. I don't think he has like that Von Miller type of bend where you can survive off of not the greatest power because you're so quick and agile around the corner. He's a good athlete. Like, I'm not saying he's a horrible athlete, but he's not a next level athlete to where he can get away without having good power. So if I can see early in training camp or in the preseason that long arm coming in, that bull rush coming in and looking really good for him, that will give me so much more hope for him on the future, because he's got the hands. He's got pretty good quickness for his size. He's got pretty good athleticism for his size. But if he can add some power with that, we can see him hit the pressure numbers, for instance, that like a Jared Verse hit last year. And really, like, I don't want to say like bounce back his stock, because he didn't have a bad rookie season, but he is lagging behind a Jared Verse and even like a Chop Robinson as of right now. And I think he can really get back up to that tier with those guys, or even surpass them, if we see a little bit more power in his pass rush repertoire this year. So overall, yeah, I think his run defense is good enough to be a 70, 75% guy this year. But for his pass rush to really take that next step and warrant more pass rushing snaps, we got to see a little bit more power, and that'll add more consistency to him as a pass rusher.
Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, talking about this Colts roster as training camp gets underway. So you talked a little bit there about the improvements that you want to see from Latu. If Anthony Richardson wins the starting job, what is the thing that you want to see him improve at? Or I think this is a better question. What thing will Anthony Richardson have gotten better at if he wins the starting job?
So much of it is just mental with him at this point, because look, it's not going to be perfect when it comes to the accuracy. And when the Colts drafted him, there was no expectation of him being some 70, 75% completion percentage type guy, right? Like, we're not asking him to be Drew Brees back there. But the expectation was for him to at least be capable of hitting the checkdowns, capable of taking some of the easy stuff, and that can kind of make the completion percentage look a little bit better and make the overall offense look a little bit better. Because as of right now, the big thing that he's doing is just he's all or nothing on like every single play. And when you already have the inaccuracies, when you have the injury issues, every play can't be this all or nothing, like throw my body like at the world and go for broke on every single play. Sometimes the smart play is taking the underneath stuff. So I think if he's going to win this battle, especially against such a boring quarterback in Daniel Jones, like Daniel Jones is going to come in here and he's going to be the most mundane, boring quarterback. But sometimes that can sell a coach on this stuff, because like, hey, I have the weapons on offense. I have the offensive line. I have the star running back. Like, just give me a boring quarterback who can complete the passes and we'll be good. So I think for Anthony Richardson, it's like, look, we've got the fun. We've got the exciting. Give me a little bit of the boring. I don't want to change who he is as a player, like in terms of like what he can do in the explosive passing and running game, because that is so immensely valuable for a team. But give me a little bit of boring. You know, we can have some slow parts here on offense. We can have some drives that go up to 8 plays, 9 plays, 10 plays. You know, it doesn't all have to be 1, 2, 3 play touchdown drives, because when you go that way, you get a lot of 3 and outs and you get your tired defense back on the field too often. So I think if he's going to win this quarterback job, it really is going to come down to making the mundane kind of cool again. Like, just be boring. Don't try to be Daniel Jones, but try to just be a little bit less or try to be like a little bit more like Daniel Jones, I guess, in that sense, just so the offense can move a little bit better. We can get the turnover numbers down, and maybe he can stay a little bit more healthy because he's not going for broke on every single play.
Couldn't agree more. You mentioned the defense being on the field a lot because the offense just couldn't sustain drives. Chris Ballard made the comment yesterday about how they weren't a very good tackling defense last year. And part of me is like, well, yeah. Because you're playing you're on the field for 40 minutes a game. And like I said, I couldn't agree more. Just, I felt like when Anthony Richardson played quarterback and he got into trouble, instead of looking for Jonathan Taylor or, you know, like whatever the check down was supposed to be, he just kind of knew that Alec Pierce was 50 yards downfield and he was just going to let it go. And if we can just change that, which I think that's easier. I think it's easier to coach a guy down than it's going to be to get Daniel Jones, who my biggest issue with him is he doesn't push the ball down the field enough. I think it's easier to get a guy to throw checkdowns more than it is to get a guy to try to throw into tighter windows.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you in theory. It's just we haven't seen Richardson develop that yet with the Colts. And honestly, for me, it's not even just taking the checkdowns either with Richardson. It's also the scrambling. It's also just not even coming all the way down to the flats, but just coming to like the middle of the field with some of these. Like you mentioned, man, like there are a lot of these plays where it's like the design is open 10 to 15 yards, but maybe it's the second read in the option in the play or whatever, or the check down is open and it's just the third read in the play. He's just so persistent on getting that deep ball that he's staying on that number one read. And look, man, I fully aspired, like I fully am all in on the philosophy of if you have one-on-one with Alec Pierce, why not try it a couple times a game? Why not? Odds are he's going to get you something good. Like he is a legit downfield threat, but it can't be every single time you see it, you know, or even when they're throwing double teams down there to him. So it's like, yeah, like we got to be able to move the offense a little bit this year. It can help his accuracy overall. It can help a lot of other things. So yeah, I'd just much rather him get a little bit more of the mundane, even again, not even just check downs, just some scrambles too. Like just get down on the scrambles and get some positive yards there, because there were just too many 3rd and 10s, 3rd and 15s that were just not converted with Anthony Richardson in the game last year.
Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts. I'm with you. He just needs to be, I think the way that you said it was really good. He can just be like a little bit more boring, like a little bit more of that, hit the check down a little bit, scramble. When you scramble, slide, all those things. I think if he can just check those boxes, like then he'll have a decent chance to win the job. If he doesn't, though, I think that everyone would define a good Anthony Richardson season pretty similarly. Like if he completed 60% of his passes, if the touchdown to interception ratio was like 2-1 and he just stayed healthy and was still able to give a little bit in the run game, I think that would please a lot of Colts fans when it comes to Richardson. I don't know what would please Colts fans from Daniel Jones, though. What do you think would be a good season from Daniel Jones?
Honestly, I think a lot of his stuff would just be tethered to wins and losses at this point. Like he could have the most putrid stats ever, and I think it would just come down to wins and losses, because his team and his fan base are so starved for the playoffs or just starved for winning games that if Daniel Jones is coming out here on every Sunday and completing 60% of his passes for 200 yards and a pick every single Sunday, but somehow they're winning games with that because of field goals or the running game is so dominant, I don't think anyone's going to complain about Daniel Jones, because we saw that same thing happen with Jacoby Brissett in 2019, where it's like, as long as they're winning games, who cares what the quarterback stats look like at the end of the day. So I think with a veteran quarterback who's kind of on his last legs in the NFL, so to speak, I mean, last legs as a starter, at least in the NFL, I think people are just much more concerned about wins and losses with him. I don't know, I guess there is a scenario where he comes out here looking like an Alex Smith in Kansas City, but I don't think that's very likely or feasible here for him. I think it's more so just going to be, fine. It's like another Gardner Minshew-ish type season if he were to start the whole year. And as long as he can get that one more win than Gardner Minshew did, I don't think anyone in the fan base is going to complain whatsoever about that. So, yeah, for Daniel Jones, I don't think there's any stats or numbers he needs to hit. It's just get the wins, and I don't think anyone's going to complain about it.
That's what I said yesterday. I said that if he can have the same season that Gardner Minshew had when he was here, I think people would be happy. The only concerning thing is that if Daniel Jones had the season that Gardner Minshew had when he was here, numbers-wise, it would be the best season of his career.
Yeah.
He would set a career high in passing yards, which is every time I look at the Daniel Jones numbers, Zach, I just I get depressed. Just geez.
Well, his one great season, and I think people don't talk about this enough, his one great season was more defined by his rushing production than his his passing production was fine because he kept control of the ball. He didn't turn the ball over a ton. But it was mostly defined by his rushing production. And that kind of went stale these last couple of years as the injuries piled up on him, as he became a little bit more passive as a runner. And when teams started to key that, hey, this is more of a one-read guy who one reads and then he scrambles, So it was kind of like this revelation that one year where the Giants kind of told Daniel Jones, hit your back step, look at your one read, and then scramble. And that'll give us more production on offense. And he was fantastic as a scrambling quarterback there. I think he was the second or third best scrambling quarterback in football that year. But as teams started to key on that, as he became more passive and the injuries piled up, we lost that production from him. And then it put a lot more on him as a passer. And then he got even more timid as a passer as well on top of that. So it just kind of became a mess there, even as his left tackle emerged as a top 3 to 5 left tackle in football, even as he got a top 10 receiver in football last year, Malik Neighbors. I mean, Malik Neighbors was a superstar last year as a rookie. So even as these great things were starting to happen to an offense that had so many bad aspects over the last couple of years, his play just became so timid because of the injuries, because of bad moments. And it kind of put a lot on him as a passer, and he's just not that level passer. Honestly, I don't think he's as good a passer as Gardner Minshew, because Gardner Minshew had a little bit of that weird magic in him. Yeah. I don't really know. I don't know how to describe Gardner Minshew, because I think anyone who watched him with the Colts, Gardner Minshew had that weird bit of magic where he could scramble off his back foot and sometimes just find something that worked. I don't know if Daniel Jones has that just problem-solving ability that Gardner Minshew had in spurts, at least with Gardner Minshew. So, yeah, my projection for Jones would be like a little bit worse than a Gardner Minshew type season, which, I mean, given off what we got last year out of the Colts quarterback, that might be good enough to get them in the playoffs if everyone stays healthy. And that's just saying something about the state of quarterback play in Indianapolis at this point.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Houston's going to be really good. That, like,
the O-line, though, look at their offensive
Yes,
line if you
that
ever
is-
want to feel down about Houston. And the new offensive
Yes.
coordinator, too, which could be a bit of a wrinkle in there. I think Houston's probably going to be good, too, because that defense is going to be,
nasty.
like, legit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, again, defenses are pretty volatile from year to year in terms of if they stay at the top of the league rankings, because injuries are so hard to predict and they're so big when it comes to defense. But one thing that is pretty easy to predict is offensive line production, and that offensive line looks just dreadful.
Yeah.
So
it's not great.
It
wasn't great
That'll
last
be the
year,
one
though.
thing that could hold him back. Yeah, it wasn't great last year, but they at least had Tunsil last year.
That's true. That's true. Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts. Last thing for you. I was thinking about this last night, and I used to be like a pretty solid believer that, because Chris Ballard mentioned yesterday, he was talking about the 4-year playoff drought and how this team hasn't really finished strong. And that's kind of been part of the reason why they haven't made the playoffs. And for me, I think teams that falter late in the year lack one of two things. And I think you could argue that the Colts lack both, probably more so one than the other. I think teams that falter late in the year either lack depth or good enough quarterback play to kind of cover up the injuries, because they happen throughout the season. And really, because I know we talked a little bit about the defensive line depth, but just like top to bottom on the roster, how much depth do you think there is?
I think it's kind of hit or miss at some positions. I do think, Chris Ballard did well for the first time in terms of just like, not the first time, but the first time in quite a few years of just adding some capable veterans in the backup area of this team. Like if you look at corner, like a guy like Corey Ballantyne as like your 5th or 6th corner, I think that's a pretty solid addition there. It's a guy who can come in and play some snaps if you need him to be. He's done it before. Khalil Herbert, for instance, at running back, I think that's a very solid add. Getting like a Mo Alley Cox back or whatever to be in that depth with your tight end group behind Tyler Ward, I think is a winning type of move. But I'm with you in terms of this Colts team still kind of has that issue where they rely on a lot of like day 3 undrafted free agent guys to be like core backups. Like we're looking at linebacker, and Cameron McGrone was getting starter snaps today with Zaire Franklin out. We're looking at safety depth, and Rodney Thomas and I guess Daniel Scott or Hunter Wohler are the next guys up there in the back end. Yeah, Daniel Scott, I don't even know if he can move anymore with all the injuries he's had. I hope he can. I was a huge fan of him, but it's been 2 years since he's really done anything on a football field. Hunter Wohler is kind of like a linebacker. We look at other positions too, like, quarterback, we kind of know is a mess. Offensive line, a lot of young guys behind the starters, and that can be very hit or miss. I think the depth is like fine, but I could certainly see like, they're an injury or two away on the offensive line, on the defensive line, at safety, at linebacker, from being a pretty dreadful team this year. And you never really want to be in that situation. But on the other hand, it is hard to find 53 like quality players in the NFL. Like no team is that deep, but you would like to feel a little bit better about some of these positions, like especially in the trenches. I think they still needed like 2 more veteran signings in the like one on defense, one on offense. Like if they could have got, I think he's still out there, but like a Zadarius Smith on the defensive line, just to add a veteran presence to take some of those interior defensive line snaps when, on pass rushing duties. And then on the offensive line, like just getting a guy who's played some more NFL snaps on the interior as a backup, I feel a little bit better. But I think the depth is fine on this team. I just don't think it's like anything you're going to write home about and be like, man, we are so deep. Like outside of what, corner and wide receiver, I don't think they really have a position that they're like super, super deep at that they could survive injuries. And even like corner, like it would be a pretty big drop off if a starter went down.
Yeah.
So, it's kind of the state of the NFL. You don't have that many players to go around, but I do think they could have been a little bit better, especially in the trenches, at adding like veteran depth behind the guys that they have.
No doubt. Zach, thanks for your time, man. As always, can't wait to read all your stuff and tune in to Locked On Colts throughout the season. Thanks for your time, man.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Wood.
See ya. That is Zach Hicks. Check him out on X at Zach Hicks 2. Does a great job covering the Colts. Works as hard and is as informed as anybody out there on it. So make sure you go check out his stuff. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, Chris Ballard made comments. This Colts roster, it's not very good. Ranked 25th by ESPN. We'll get into all of it when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
After speaking on my behalf with the IRS, my entire debt of $25,000 will be eliminated.
Whether you've received collection letters or you're already facing liens and garnishments, call for your free consultation. There are no upfront fees. Priority tax relief. Let's make your taxes our priority. Call 800-958-3071. 800-958-3071. 800-958-3071.
Priority tax relief.
The best takes. Maybe. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy's Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching on X, __ Jonathan Smith. If you want to follow me there, you can also listen on that Indy Sports Ticket app, not only to my show, but also to the Dan Dockett Show from noon to 3. Big show today for him. Rob Dibble, 12:30. Kent Sterling, 1:30. Going to talk about training camp a little bit. And Chris Ballard spoke at the podium yesterday, and, 27 minutes of nonsense. I was sitting there listening to it. My wife was sitting beside me doing her nails and stuff. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to it. And she's just like, he doesn't say anything. He's so incredibly vague. And Chris Ballard, it's not fair to call him a salesman, because I think every general manager who does one of those press conferences, that's what they are. They want you and me to buy into whatever team, whatever product they're putting on the field, especially at this point in the season where there's supposed to be as much excitement as possible, because things only go down from here. Guys get hurt, guys get cut, guys get unhappy, drama, all that stuff happens from this point forward. And so, his job, Chris Ballard's, is to get us to buy in a little bit. My thing is, he's just a bad salesman. Calling Chris Ballard, a car salesman doesn't do it justice. He's a bad car salesman. If you were to go in to, any place where you can buy a car, the person would grab you. They'd be really nice to you. Chris Ballard does a good job of that. Very nice guy. And then they would tell you useful things. Right? Hey, this car that you're looking at, it's a 4-cylinder engine. It gets 32 miles to the gallon, comes with a 100,000-mile warranty. And you would hear that, and theoretically, your interest in the car would increase. And then they'd be like, see, this car, it's better than, this other company's car because of the gas mileage. And they only do a 50,000-mile warranty. We do 100,000. That's why it's valuable. That's why this is a better deal than what that other company or car dealership could offer you. That's how most car salesmen try to sell a car. They tell you factual things that theoretically make you more interested in the car. Chris Ballard just tells you factual things and then doesn't elaborate. If Chris Ballard tried to sell you a car the same way that he tries to sell this Colts team, he'd just be like, this car has 4 wheels, and that's a good thing. It's important because cars need to have 4 wheels. You'd say, well, Chris, why are these 4 wheels better than those 4 wheels? Just because they are. Just take my word for it. We have DeForest Buckner. We have competition now, and that's good. And then, that's it. There's no backing up. He was talking about the Anthony Richardson timeline, and he talked about how, do you think people regret giving up on Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold? I'm sure they do. And then he mentions that when you have a guy on the right trajectory, why would you get rid of him just because everyone else wants you to? My question is, what have we seen from Anthony Richardson to make us think that he's on the right trajectory? The dude barely completed half of his passes last year. It's not good. He has a lower career completion percentage than Jamarcus Russell, who wasn't very good, by the way. He just says things and just doesn't offer any substance to them, and I think it's caused a major lack of trust between him and the fan base and people like me who talk about the Colts, because he just says things and then doesn't offer any supporting facts or any details to help support whatever opinion he's giving. And it's annoying. I'll be honest. The fact that there's so much competition at Colts camp this year isn't a good thing. I want there to be no competition at Colts camp. I want us to walk in and us, sit here and be like, Anthony Richardson's so good, there's no competition for him at quarterback. And this edge rusher is so good, there is no competition as to who's going to start over him. And I would love to say that about every position on the roster. If there's a lot of competition in your training camp, it's probably because you don't have very many great players. And I want the Colts to have as many great players as possible. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to tune into the Real Jonathan Smith Show I greatly appreciate it. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon. Got a new guest coming on tomorrow to talk a little NFL. Tony East is going to join as well to talk a little Fever. The Dan Dockett Show comes your way next. Rob Dibble, 12:30. Kent Sterling at 1:30. Going to be a great show, so make sure you stay tuned in to the Dan Dockett Show. I'll talk to you tomorrow starting at 10 a.m.